Welcome to the Liberation is Lit podcast, where the power of storytelling meets the force of social change. I'm your host, Taylor Simon, and in this podcast, we believe in the profound impact of stories. And I am so honored to be here today with my good friend, Cassie Premo Steele, author, writer, coach, everything, just all around amazing human. And I'm just so ready for this conversation. So, Cassie, could you tell us a little bit about yourself as a writer and what inspires you to write poetry or just write in general?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Taylor, for having me here with you. I honor our connection as poets and writers and community leaders. So I want to say that it's really quite a moving thing for me to be able to share this time with you today. I can talk a little bit about biography and specifics as we go on, but I was thinking about a different way of introducing myself, and I thought I would read a short poem called Well. This was the very first poem that I ever got published. So it was many, many years ago, and it's in my collected volume called Tongues in Trees. And it's the first poem in that collection. So this was published in 1994. So I always say I'm so good with language, and it means I'm really bad at math. Was that 30 years ago?
Yes, because not to this is an
Yeah.
intergenerational podcast, but
Yeah.
yeah, that was the year I was born. So I'll be
Oh, that's
30 in
wonderful.
2 weeks.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I love that synchronicity. Okay.
Yes.
So this is called Well. And I wanted to share it with you as a way of introducing listeners to why I write. Well, well, here we are, swapping secrets like jewels in foggy alleyways. Shiny currency buys the knowing well, going deeper to the water, flowing currents below frozen ground, quenching thirst so well. Done daily like prayer, we press our lips against the words, gently giving well. So that's my answer to why I write, because I think there are profound connections between writing and healing. And I think when we write, we make ourselves well. When we read, we help make ourselves and the world well. And it's a kind of mutual feedback loop that language is what creates community. Stories allow us to connect across difference. And in this world where so much is either conflictual or violent or harmed or, power hierarchies, us and them, all of that, liberation is lit. Literature itself, reading, poetry, novels, stories, writing, all of these things are healing tools that I think we were given as humans to put ourselves on the good path. I won't even say the right path, because then that gets into binary thinking of right and wrong. But when we're on the good path, meaning, are we good? Are you good? Am I good? Are we good together? That's what writing can help us journey on.
I love that so much. And I really love the poem about just like the deepness, but also the it's okay to be shallow when writing and how you think it's shallow, but you step into the puddle and it's like actually a well. So
Yeah,
I love like
exactly.
that and just like using writing, storytelling as a way to build bridges and connections and even not only among each other as humans, but thinking about connections to the world we live in. And that brings me to your book, Beaver Girl. I I'm just so enamored with Beaver Girl. And it's so funny. I don't think I ever told you this, but I I don't remember how your content came on my social media, but when Beaver Girl came out, I would see it everywhere. And I didn't realize you were a local author to Columbia. And I'm just like, why do I keep seeing like this Beaver Girl stuff everywhere? And then Evelyn Berry, who was also on the podcast, connected us. And I was just like, that makes a lot more sense now. And I'm so glad we got to connect. But going back to Beaver Girl, what inspired you to write a climate justice oriented novel?
I was in the middle of the pandemic. I had a college age daughter at the time who was really struggling with the pandemic. I also had developed long COVID because my wife and I got COVID in March of 2020. So we were really in that first wave, especially in South Carolina. And I was listening to Science Friday with my dog, Lenny Bruce, and heard an interview with Emily Fairfax where she talked about how during the pandemic, she couldn't do her regular field research on foot. So she was sending up drones into areas in Colorado where wildfires had devastated the landscape. And if you remember in that, you know, time, we not only were dealing with totalitarian politics and a global pandemic, but also wildfires all over. And what she discovered is that every place that held a beaver family, the scientific name is colony, but I don't like that word, so I changed it to family. These places were untouched by the wildfires. Green, riparian, lush areas that supported all of life from the smallest insect up to the largest predators. And it's because beavers are a keystone species. Keystone in architecture is the stone that keeps the whole thing together. So when you have an arch, you have a keystone in the arch that kind of keeps everything together. When you're building a foundation, you'll have a keystone that allows the whole building to be solid and structurally sound. There are some keystone species in the animal world, and beavers are one of them. So before settler colonization and European immigration into North America, even the places that we think of as deserts, like New Mexico and northern Arizona, places that we just associate with desert right now, were green and lush because there were beavers. But what happened with the white settler colonization of the continent is that beavers became the currency, which is interesting. If you think of the word currency, that's current, there's water in it. It's the national animal of Canada. Many early coins had beavers on them. Beaver pelts were actually used as money, all because of fashion in Europe. The beaver hat was so popular that people could get really rich really fast by, I will use the word, committing genocide against the beaver community. I mean, there are photos of thousands of pelts, just piled up, ready for processing and turning into hats. So when I realized the connection between this collective trauma that we have dealt with in history in terms of colonization, settlers, genocide, and the incredible hope that beavers hold for us as climate change heroes, I turned to my dog, Len, and I said, Len, that's going to be our next book. But I'm not a science girl. So, I had no idea where to start. So this is a nice lesson too for writers. I did something that I had never done before. I went on Twitter I miss the old Twitter. And I tagged Emily Fairfax, I tagged Ira Flato, I tagged, Ben Goldfarb, who I knew had written a best-selling nonfiction book about beavers, and I asked for help. And there is a hashtag Beaver Believer community that's amazing. They have the ethos of beavers in terms of being hardworking and supportive and really wanting to sustain all of life. So people came out and helped me and suggested books I could read, scholars I could contact. Ben Goldfarb gave me access to his Google Drive of beaver photos from all the years of his research, which really helped me a lot in creating the characters because I had these very close up images of faces that became Chap and Penny and Gigi and Henry and all of the beaver characters in the book. So I would say, just as long story short, in the depths of a very fearful time, beavers gave me a vision of hope. And I wanted to write a book that would be the story of that hope and incorporating science into it and incorporating it, what I know as a trauma scholar and what it takes to witness and heal from trauma. And so I just started doing the research and writing.
And that's amazing that you found you said the Beaver Believer community on Twitter. That's so awesome. Like, that's got to be a fun way to research. And I'm wondering, how was the process of writing this novel different from you writing your poetry collections?
Mm. So poetry is, I would say, my primary genre. And from a very early age, I always wrote poems. And I know that a poem is coming because for me, the sense that is most engaged is hearing, which is interesting because I'm not musical. I cannot sing. My wife is an amazing singer-songwriter. I don't have that talent. And but what I do hear is the rhythm and the tone of the poem as it's coming. And so I sit and I listen to it. And even before there are words or a sense of what the poem is about, I can hear it coming. And so when I'm writing a poem, I'm connecting the words, the rhythm, the rhyme, the sound to what is coming through my body. I would say it's very embodied. When I'm writing fiction, it's a completely different process. I do a lot of research ahead of time because I think people turn to novels to learn something. There's an emotional component of feeling connected to the characters, but also we want to be immersed in a world and learn about that world and help it reflect on our world. So I do all the research and then I create a fairly detailed outline of all the scenes in the novel before I even start writing. So when I do write, I stick to a schedule. I have a word count goal that I hit every day that I write. And when I've finished with a scene and hit a word count, then I stop and I get up the next day and I do it all over again. So, in order to sustain the kind of intensity that I want in writing and that I feel when writing a poem, I create this structure around the writing of fiction so that I can go deeply into the well, and then come back up again and still have energy left for work and family and self-care and all of that. So those are the two different ways that I write.
I need some of that discipline to work on my own novel, but we touched on this briefly about just the hope, like writing your hope during the pandemic through Beaver Girl. But how does social justice in general influence your writing?
I would say that in my writing and also in the writing coaching and the teaching that I have done, one of the main principles that I want to practice and also teach is service over ego. I think so much in our culture tells us that there are certain people who are geniuses and certain people who are great and others who aren't. And this is a real problem when it comes to social justice and issues of equality and inclusion. So, as writers, we want to ask ourselves, how can my writing be of service to the world? Not what can I get out of it, or what will people think of it, or any kind of better than scenario, like if I have this success, then someone will think that I am better than I am or better than others. All of that kind of comparative competition, I think, comes from a really violent capitalist system. And so I don't subscribe to that myself, and I don't teach it, and I try not to write in those ways. So I felt with Beaver Girl, I felt with really all of my books that yes, they're about me, there are little autobiographical elements to it, but it can't just be about that. It really has to be about how am I using my gifts and talents to be of service to the world. And when we make it's a very small shift. I've sometimes used the metaphor of you're driving down a road. I'll use Beltline as a good example because I had this idea when I was driving on Beltline. So Beltline, for those who don't live in Columbia, is a Beltline around the whole city almost, and it's a fairly big 4-lane urban road. You can be in the left lane or you can be in the right lane, and you're still going in the same direction. Switching from ego to service is just like that. It's just a little bit of a lane shift. You're still going in the same direction. You're still committed to your writing. You're still who you are with your experiences and your expertise, but you're just shifting over and you're saying, this can't just be about me. It really has to be how I can serve others with this work. And the thing about it is, you also can't fake it. The universe will welcome your work with open arms when you have made that shift from ego to service. But it can't be a performance, it has to really be an authentic presence of feeling connected to. It doesn't matter how many people read this. It doesn't matter what I get out of it. It doesn't matter if people, critics like it or not. It's way beyond numbers and all of that, competitive spirit that I was talking about. It's really about what is the essence of what this gift can be for the world and how can others use it to help themselves either heal or gain clarity or grow, evolve, find forgiveness, find healing. And when you're in that space, there's a kind of generosity of spirit, I think, and people feel that and they will open their doors to you and want to help and know that you're working from a space of collaboration and service rather than competition and ego. And the more that you practice it, all kinds of things can help, self-care, mindfulness, meditation, exercise, time off, social media fasts, like all time in nature. There's so many tools to keep us in that space of presence. But when we are, we can get very good at figuring out what's good for us and what we don't need to worry about, what's not really about us at all.
I just love that using our gifts and talents to be in service and taking away the ego from it because I hear the advice all the time. If you want to write, don't expect to be like rich. If especially if you want to write authentic like stories that are really rooted in art because like Daniel Steele, James Patterson, they have people writing for them. So they are a brand and a business in themselves. They are not to say that they're not artists in their own right, but a lot of their books and content is their brand and their business, and they have lots of help to do that. So yes, I know we're coming up on time, so I do want to ask, what are some of your upcoming projects that are coming out, especially around the One Book Columbia program?
So I will show the covered Beaver Girl for those who haven't seen it yet. I'm so excited that in April it was announced that Beaver Girl is the 2024 One Book, One Community selection for Columbia, South Carolina. So from April through September, there are events that include panel discussions, art contests, all kinds of inspirational and community building activities, including a grand finale in September at the One Columbia Co-op. And you can find out more about that at several websites. You can go to my website, Cassie.com, just my name, or jasper.org. The Jasper Project is one of the sponsors of the One Book, One Community project. There's also information at the One Columbia website, which is also one of the sponsors of the project. And people can get the book at all kinds of places, including Liberation is Lit, which I encourage people to visit if you don't know about it yet. It's a Black-owned progressive bookstore owned by Taylor Simon. So I want to just kind of shout out for you, because if people are listening to this because they're interested in me or Beaver Girl, I also want them to know that they can order from Liberation is Lit. Aside from all of the One Book events, in July I'll also be heading back to Oklahoma for the Woody Guthrie Poetry Festival. So it'll be the third year in a row that I've read my poetry there, and it's an amazing statewide festival with events in Oklahoma City, Okemah, and Tulsa. And what's really interesting in terms of social justice is that you may know the folk singer Woody Guthrie, who was amazing and wonderful, and also a storyteller and a poet. What people may not know is that his father was, I'll go ahead and just use the phrase, a white supremacist who was involved in many lynchings in Oklahoma. So part of Woody Guthrie's childhood was, I think, witnessing this racial violence and wanting to use his gifts and talents to be of service to the world, to speak for poor people, people of color, workers, the downtrodden, those who don't have the justice that they need in this world. So the Woody Guthrie Poetry Festival is a statewide opportunity for poets from all over to come together to honor that legacy of speaking, using our poetic voices for justice in the world.
Oh, I love that. And I love how it's connected to like the history of like Oklahoma and things like that. What have you been reading lately that's been filling your cup?
I went to Powell's bookstore in Portland when I was in Oregon and Washington. for the Pacific Northwest Beaver Girl book tour, which was amazing. And that was at the end of May. And the very first book that I picked up, and I have it here, I kind of keep it with me, is Translations of Sappho by Anne Carson. And the title is If Not, comma, Winter, Fragments of Sappho. And to me, the reason that I picked up the book, aside from, being a proud lesbian and loving Sappho, is that comma in the title. It's so beautiful. If not, comma, winter. Right there in that pause is possibility. It's the small kind of nerdy thing about being a writer that I love, that the form itself is beautiful and means something and matters. And all writing matters. So if you're listening to this and you're a New York Times bestseller, or you're listening to this and you write in your journal from time to time when you feel overwhelmed with emotion, your writing matters. You can take that comma, that pause for yourself, and feel the possibility in it.
Oh my gosh. I know this is supposed to be for listeners to get a lot out of it, but I feel like I got a lot of out of our conversation. But what is just some last minute advice that you will offer listeners who want to make a positive impact in their communities?
The most important thing is to take care of yourself. I was talking before about service over ego and competition and feeling like there are only so many slices of the pie and we've got to, crush it, grab it, all of that does violence to every single being on the planet. And so, in order to stop that violence, we have to stop the violence to ourselves. What do you need in order to feel heal and whole and healthy so that you can serve the world in that way of presence that we were talking about earlier? So rather than rushing out of your house or, pounding things on social media when you get upset about something in the news, pause and step back and ask yourself, what do I need? Do I need a phone call with a friend? Do I need an amazing therapist? I have an amazing therapist. I've been seeing her for years. She helps me 24/7 in my head. Do you need a massage? Do you need a walk at Congaree National Park? Do you need to track your hydration because you realize that you only get like 1 cup of water a day? All of those things matter because you matter. And particularly when we are members of the queer community or people of color or people who struggle with neurodivergence or other kinds of differences, it's especially important to take care of ourselves so that we can be kind of, juicy, fun, joyful members of the community. That's justice. They want us to burn out. They want us to be doing our activism and our work and our hustling 24/7 and never take a break. So don't listen to them. Start with yourself. Deep self-care on a daily basis. Daily. Just 10 minutes, 20 minutes. It doesn't take that much, but it's regular. Just like regular writing will take you where you want to go with your career.
Yes, I think of the Audre Lorde quote of self-care is active self-preservation. And what you said too was a good point about they want us to burn out. They want us to always be on the defensive. They want us to just treat fighting for our liberation the same as how we operate under capitalism. So we are expendable. So that self-care piece is so important. So thank you so much, Cassie.
Thank you,
Aside
Taylor.
from your website, CassiePremoSteele.com, where can people find you and your work?
I would also let people know that I have another website called earthjoywriting.com. There are audio and video workshops combining nature and writing on there. It's based on my book, Earth Joy Writing, which was published in 2015. So it's coming up on the 10th anniversary. And seasonally, I teach free forest journaling workshops at Congaree National Park. And the next one will be September 7th. So people can sign up ahead of time for that. If they want to reach out to me, there's a contact page on both of those websites. And if you want me to visit a book group or lead a free workshop for you at Congaree or at a city park, I'd be happy to do that. I truly feel that I'm here as a writer to be of service in any way that the world wants me to. So feel free to reach out.
But you will catch me at the next journal writing in
Good.
Congaree Park because I signed up for one a couple months ago and then I got sick and I was like, no. But
Uh,
I'm so excited to do that. And thank you so much again for sharing just everything about writing and just being such a joy and light, gracing the presence of this podcast. So, everything, all of the books that we talked about, all of the events and websites that we talked about will be linked in the show notes on liberationislit.com. And I am just, again, I feel like I got so much out of it myself from this episode, but
I'm
I want
so
to thank all of the listeners for being a part of Liberation is Lit podcast. And if you have any stories you want to share or want to suggest any topics or just want to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Liberation is Lit. Or you can visit the website at liberationislit.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider leaving a review. And remember, your voice matters. And together, through the lens of stories, we're going to make a difference in the world. I'll see y'all next time.